This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. You can visit their store by using my referral link in the description below. Hi everyone, I'm Nizzahon, and it's Monday, and that means it's time for another MTG Top 10, the series where I rank cards based on their historical performance and Magic's highest level of competition. I've been doing these for a long time, and there's a whole lot of them, over 460 in fact, but there's still a lot I haven't done, and one of those is looking at multicolored cards of each card type. The only one of these I've done so far is Planeswalkers, so there's a lot more to do. It seemed like a good time to do this too, as the upcoming Streets of New Capenna is a multicolor focused set. Today, we're going to take a look at multicolored sorceries. Usually, a card costing more than one color of mana means that you're getting a better deal for your mana investment than you would be getting if the card only cost a single color of mana. And that means there are a whole lot of powerful multicolor cards out there. Sorceries are also pretty restricted about when they can be cast, so the effects they deliver can often be more powerful than an instant of the same cost would be. To be eligible for this list, all a card had to do was be multicolored and a sorcery. In all, that means there were 278 cards eligible for this list, and in this video we'll look at the 10 that have left the biggest impact on competitive Magic. Before we get started, here's a quick reminder on how I score cards in these videos. A first tier top 8 is worth 2 points. This includes things like Pro Tours and World Championships, and a second tier top 8 is worth 1 point. This includes events like Grand Prix and Magic Online challenges. At number 10, it is Bring to Light. Converge is a mechanic that is all about spending mana of different colors, and in the case of Bring to Light, it functions as a tutor that searches up a creature, instant, or sorcery and exiles it, and then you can cast that card without paying its mana cost. And it can get any of these out of your deck as long as it has a mana value less than or equal to the colors of mana you spent on it. So if you spent all 5 colors, you can grab something that costs 5. Obviously, this is pretty sweet in any deck that can go the full 5 colors, as it will allow you to grab almost anything. While it was played a little in Standard and finished in the top 8 of some minor tournaments, it never actually managed any points there. However, it's found plenty of success in both Modern and Pioneer. In Modern, it's been played in Scapeshift decks, where Bring to Light can function as additional copies of Scapeshift that can also tutor up all sorts of other stuff. It has also found success in Niv-Mizzet Reborn decks in both Pioneer and Modern. Obviously, these decks are all about being 5 colors, and Bring to Light can serve the double purpose of helping you search up Niv and being a card that you can draw with your Niv when it comes into play. Bring to Light is in a great spot to gain more points going forward. Also, get ready to hear Niv-Mizzet's name several more times in this video since he loves multicolored cards. At number 9, it is Rakdos's Return. This multicolored X spell does X damage to your opponent and makes them discard X cards. If you manage to fire this off on someone, they're going to feel absolutely miserable, since they lose a bunch of life and all or most of their hand. In Block and Standard, it was played some as a sideboard card that was particularly good at punishing control decks for tapping out. It was an especially nice way to counter an opposing Sphinx's Revelation, with the 2 cards being mirror images of one another. It did see some pretty significant main deck play in Standard Jund decks and Devotion to Black. It's also gained points in Pioneer, Niv-Mizzet Reborn decks, where it's likely to continue to accumulate points. At number 8, it is Slaughter Games. This multicolored sorcery has largely been a sideboard card. It lets you take away a card of your choice from anywhere your opponent might have it. This is especially useful against decks that are reliant on a single card. There are lots of effects like this in the game, but this might be the best one of them all, specifically because it can't be countered. This means that combo decks that like to run counter magic to protect their combo can't do anything about this. It has seen sideboard play in Standard, Modern, and Pioneer. Basically, if a deck's named after a single card, or maybe 2, Slaughter Games is going to be pretty good against it. As long as combo decks are relevant in Pioneer and Modern, it's going to continue to gain points. At number 7, it's Fire Spout. This multicolored sorcery is a board sweeper that is part of a pretty cool cycle of hybrid mana cards that have different effects depending on what color of mana you use to cast them. It only hits flyers with just green mana and only creatures on the ground with just red, and obviously, both those with flying and those without it when you pay both red and green mana. This makes Fire Spout a pretty nice sweeper, since you can opt to choose the option that most benefits you when you cast it. That flexibility, plus the efficiency of 3 damage to everything for 3 mana, has led to Fire Spout seeing play in all of Magic's competitive formats in which it's been legal. In most of these formats, it sees play in combo decks that like having a 3-mana sweeper that can buy them the necessary time against aggro decks to go off with their combo. The exception to this is block in Standard, where it was mostly just played in ramp and control decks, where it pretty much did the same thing. It slowed down aggro decks to make the game go longer. In Extended, it was played in Scapeshift decks and Tezzerator. In Modern, it's been played in combo decks like Splinter Twin, Scapeshift, and Primeval Titan. And in Legacy and Vintage, it's been played in Oath of Druids. It doesn't have any points since 2019, so its position on this list could be in danger going forward. At number 6, it is Deafening Clarion, another multicolored 3-mana board sweeper that can do 3 to everything. Board sweepers are, of course, somewhat situational, and the Clarion gives you a decent backup option if casting it will hurt you more than your opponent. It can give your whole board lifelink. That's not a great deal for 3 mana, but if you're ahead of your opponent, at least the Clarion can do that and make the race a lot better for you. The Clarion is kind of interesting because you can actually choose both. So, if you have creatures with more than 3 toughness and your opponent doesn't, it can be especially devastating. Like Firespout, it's of course mostly been played in decks that want to make the game go longer. Decks like Temur Reclamation and Fires of Invention might have kind of slow starts, but if they managed to get to the later part of the game, they were pretty much guaranteed to win. So, decks like that ran the Clarion to help survive an opposing player's early onslaught. It has also gained some points in Historic, Pioneer, and Modern, with many of those points coming in Niv-Mizzet Reborn decks. It's well positioned to keep on gaining points. At number 5, it's Cut to Ribbons, a card that is 2 different sorceries. Even though you can cast either side of this with only a single color of mana, if you want to cast both sides, you need both black and red. It's one of the Aftermath split cards from Amonkhet, which means while it's in your hand, you can only cast the first part, Cut, and when it's in your graveyard, you can only cast Ribbons. The Cut side alone is a very good removal spell in most standard formats, so it's pretty awesome that you have the upside of casting Ribbons from the graveyard. And Ribbons certainly isn't efficient or flexible, but because you got such a good deal on Cut, the fact you can use the same card to finish off your opponent later in the game is pretty awesome. While in Standard, it was heavily played, showing up in a variety of aggro decks that were red and black, including Mardu Vehicles and Rakdos aggro. In addition to all that success in Standard, it, like a lot of cards on this list, has also shown up in Pioneer Niv-Mizzet Reborn decks. At number 4, it is DREADBORE. For just a single black and a single red mana, this multicolored sorcery lets you destroy a creature or a planeswalker. That's a pretty great deal. So good that it has seen play in a whole bunch of formats. It isn't heavily played in Legacy, but it's gained a few points there in decks like Grixis Control, and it sees a ton of play in Pioneer, showing up not only in Niv-Mizzet Reborn decks, but also Rakdos Control and Jund. In Modern, it's also played in Jund, as well as Grixis Control, Death Shadow, and Niv-Mizzet Reborn decks. It's well positioned to keep gaining points because when it comes to a card that can deal with creatures or planeswalkers, there just isn't anything more efficient. At number 3, it is Expressive Iteration, which is by far the newest card to make the list, as it came out in 2021's Strixhaven. This multicolored sorcery is a great draw spell for only 2 mana, and arguably one of the best draw spells in the whole game. It lets you look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them on the bottom, one of them in exile, and one of them into your hand. You can then play the card you exiled until the end of your turn. Played correctly, this usually ends up being a 2-mana draw 2 that gives you card selection. You just have to make sure to choose to exile a card that you can play the same turn you cast it. So make sure you don't play a land ahead of your iteration. Iteration has already made an impact on every Magic format, including both Legacy and Vintage. Basically, any deck that can cast Iteration is playing it in all the formats. This includes more controlling decks, but also spell-based creature decks that look to win the game with stuff like Arclight Phoenix. Expressive Iteration has only existed for about a year, and already has a very impressive score. It not only has the potential to move up this list, but it might even sit atop it when all is said and done. For now though, there are 2 cards ahead of it. Like our number 2 card, MAELSTROM Pulse. The Pulse can destroy any non-land permanent, and it can even destroy additional copies of that permanent, which can really punish your opponent for having multiples of something in play, and it's especially effective against tokens. This is the kind of thing that aggro, mid-range, and control decks have been interested in at various times, and it's especially nice that it gives you a main deck way to blow up problematic permanents that most removal can't, like planeswalkers, artifacts, and enchantments. This makes it one of the most versatile and powerful removal spells around, and that's why it has so many points and has been played across pretty much every format. Its most common home across all the formats is Jund, and that's the primary deck that has played the Pulse in Standard, Extended, and Modern. It's pretty much a lock to keep on gaining points, but Expressive Iteration is only 10 points behind it and gaining points at a much faster rate. And at number 1, it's Supreme Verdict. This multicolored sorcery is an uncounterable Wrath for only 4 mana. Wrath effects are, of course, super powerful, as they allow you to completely reset the game in most situations, but most Wraths can be countered by an obnoxious blue player. Obviously, Supreme Verdict can't be, and that has made it arguably the best Wrath effect of all. 4 mana Wraths basically always see play, as they're cheap enough to save a control player from an aggro onslaught, and this one comes with that very real and counterable upside. Nuking the opponent's board without asking permission is awesome. As a result, Supreme Verdict has been played across multiple formats and primarily in control decks. In Block and Standard, it played a big role in making control decks, especially blue-white control decks, super strong. In Modern, most control decks try to run both blue and white so they can run this powerful card, and in Legacy and Vintage, the uncounterable clause is perhaps the most important, as virtually every deck runs counter magic. It is of course also seeing play in Pioneer. It is still gaining points, like most of the cards on this list, but it will be interesting to see if it can hold off Expressive Iteration in the long run. Well, those are the 10 multicolored sorceries that have left the biggest impact on competitive Magic. If you want to own any of these powerful spells, check out the description where you'll find a direct Card Kingdom link for each of them. If you want to make sure you catch future episodes of this series, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. If you want to catch up on past MTG Top 10s, there should be some playlists on your screen shortly. And if you want to go the extra mile in supporting the channel, you can on Patreon. Thanks for watching.